else ready? Okay. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Um, so, people have been trying to understand dogs ever since the beginning of time. One never knows what they'll do. You can read every day where a dog saved the life of a drowning child or lay down his life for his master. Some people will call this loyalty. I don't. I may be wrong, but I call it love. The deepest kind of love. It's a shame that people all over the world can't have that kind of love in their hearts. There will be no wars, slaughter, or murder, no greed or selfishness. It will be the kind of world that God wants us to have, a wonderful world. And that is from Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls, which kind of took its place as my inspiration for the project that's come to this point, which we'll get to a little bit later. I want to talk about my overall process, a few of my sources, and then I'll do a short reading at the end. So this project actually started, it's probably been over 2 years now, and it started as something completely different under a different advisor with Will, and it was heavily focused on mental illness and psychology and crime and, you know, dirty, depressing things that eventually they took their toll on me, and my mental illness started to come forward, and I ended up withdrawing from school, taking off a semester and a half, and kind of refocusing the project. You know, in the back of my mind, it was always there. You know, was that a part of how I was feeling? And a big part of, you know, getting over that for me was, of course, my fiance and my wife, but my dog was there the whole time, and he was a really important part of getting well for me. And so I think that's kind of where the Red Fern Grows came in, because in the back of my mind, I read it when I was really little, like 8 or 9 in school, and so those themes of the dog kind of coming to the boy's rescue, the 2 dogs, and saving him from, you know, this depression that he feels, and so Puck, that's my dog's name. Eventually, I decided that I wanted to do something with dogs. You know, at the time, I wanted to train dogs. I was trying to work at the animal shelter. I was trying to do all this with dogs, and so originally I wanted to write a piece that was dog-centric. It's since evolved into something different, and as I, you know, explored more into the project and other works and sources, the project changed with me as I learned and grew and had new experiences. The project changed with me, so I think that's been something really interesting. It's been a couple years, and it started out as something completely different, and then cycled back, and, you know, now reading over it and it's close to its final stage, I can even see some of those original thoughts, the mental illness, the depression, that kind of psychological stuff is still coming in. So none of that's gone, but it's taken on a new light with the dog, and the dog kind of acts like he does in Where the Red Fern Grows, as almost a savior, a religious icon, like in the quote that I just shared. So speaking of Where the Red Fern Grows, it started off as inspiration, and I took archetypes, but I wanted to almost modernize it, to change it in a way to make it more relevant to my life mostly, and to modern readers. I don't think there's many, you know, boys living out on a farm in the middle of nowhere with their 2 hunting dogs who have an experience like this. But there were a lot of themes that I took from it. One of them I already mentioned was this supernatural, almost religious aspect of a dog in someone's life, almost comparing them to a Christ figure, a savior almost, something who can come in and reach into the darkness and pull you out of a place where you don't want to be. There's themes of trauma, there's a lot of death actually in this children's novel is what it's classified as. But there's a scene where a boy, you know, they're hunting a raccoon together, and their dogs end up fighting, And so the boy goes over to take an axe to a couple of the dogs, and he trips and falls on the axe blade, and dies in front of the main character. And so there's this heavy trauma throughout the novel. At the end, when his dogs eventually die, there's that trauma as well, and coping with that and mourning, and how the dogs help him, in the end, when he comes to understand and he gets closure and he sees the red fern grow out of their grave. The dogs give him this understanding of his life that he seemed to be struggling for the entire novel. So those are kind of the things that I took from this, less, hunting dogs and that kind of story of how amazing they are at hunting, but more the stuff underneath about coping and trauma and understanding. And so that kind of led me into the beginning of the project, and I started writing, and I knew that I wanted the main character to kind of be at rock bottom, and the dogs would swoop in sometime in a mystical, kind of mysterious way and pluck him from that. So as I started writing, I knew that I needed a darkness and a light, competing balance for the main character's well-being. And this kind of led into my second source, which is Kingdom Hearts, which is a video game on the PlayStation. It's a combination of Final Fantasy, which is like an action role-playing game, and Disney characters. So I took the transcripts from that and took a lot of themes of this light versus dark. They kind of focus on that a lot. The quest theme, a destiny, if you will. And I took those themes and worked them in by actually using the game in the story as kind of an alternate reality for the main character. He uses it to escape, and he kind of almost frames his worldview off of that sometimes. So the main character is set up for that epic battle between light and dark, and I kind of had the dog in my mind as coming in to be that light that would eventually save him. So it all comes together. I promise, it all comes together. But the main character starts out in that rut that I mentioned. I did a lot of characterization in the beginning of the main character, showing how he thinks and how he feels, showing how easily his emotions kind of take control of him and how he doesn't feel in control of his reality. And I wanted to set all that up so that I could show exactly how the dogs would affect that in the end. So with all that being said, I'd like to go ahead and do the reading. So this picks up, it's pretty near the beginning. It's on the first page. It's after I do a little intro. I start kind of characterizing the main character, whose name is Cal. So, Cal's face looked long and concave in the reflections on the first floor windows. There was a cowlick on the right side of his widow's peak that always led his bedhead into a faux hawk, and he felt irony and alienation from his own appearance. Cal actually liked his cowlick, if for no other reason than the word itself gave him some joy. But he always felt that a greasy faux hawk was the mark of someone who owned a motorcycle, or performed on stage, or had friends, or at the very least was extroverted. Naturally, Cal had a compendium of hats to hide himself with whatever color or graphic he felt spoke for him on any given day. However, today Cal realized, rather uncharacteristically, he had forgotten his veil when he felt the gunk splash onto his exposed crown. Feeling rushed, naked, and much too self-aware, Cal decided not to go back for it as he vigorously jostled his hair to give it any other appearance. As he turned up the street, Cal noticed Gary Cruel, Cal's landlord and the other only soul in the building, swinging a snow shovel at the mangy pack of stray dogs in the alley near his doorstep. While Gary had a very strict zero-tolerance policy when it came to pets, Cal had seen the terrarium full of snakes that Gary kept in his bedroom closet. Gary subscribed to a service that delivered fresh mice to his door twice a week that he would feed to his slithery roommates. They arrived right on schedule, 8 a.m. every Monday and Thursday, and Gary was not the only one watching for them. The local strays had been conditioned to show up in tandem with the delivery, thus the shovel swinging. Gary cursed, exasperated after a few hefty swings. You little swing, thievin' swing, buckers. Gary brought the shovel down hard onto the brick and managed to spook the majority of the crowd into keeping their distance. Gary bent over and retrieved what was left of the package, and he spotted Cal as he turned to head inside with his prize. Cal? His chubby finger extended in Cal's direction. You know we've got a problem? Cal kept walking. Sorry, Gary, but it seems like you are the only one with a problem. Say, boy, it's Mr. Cruel to you. You don't speak to me that way, and you better quit leaving kibble in the alley for them animals. I'll call animal control and tell them you're feeding into the city's wild animal problem. Cal sighed and responded as he continued around the corner and out of sight. Like I said, Mr. Cruel, it seems like you're the only one with the problem. Gary yelled after him, and boy, I want to see that rent money before tomorrow. Cal continued on to the bus stop, able to hear Mr. Cruel swearing all the way to his snake closet. It was true that Cal was leaving food out for the strays, and he always made sure to leave enough to keep them around the night on Sundays and Wednesdays. Between Cal's drop-off and Gary's snake food, the local animals had a reliable and consistent source of food. Those few moments twice a week were far and away the high points of Cal's week. Those fleeting seconds of watching a pack of wild animals steal from his landlord gave Cal something to look forward to. Other than that, Cal lived a rather dissatisfying life. He was nearing 30 years old, lived alone in a studio apartment, worked a dead-end job washing dishes for a strip club, and the majority of his social interaction was with the recently impregnated dancer Mia, who was working the kitchen until she regained her figure. As Cal stepped off the bus, he saw the usual crowd of dejected and desensitized men that left the club past daybreak. These men never met Cal's glance, just as they never met each other's. A night of low lights and low spirits left them with familiar shame in their eyes, and it was clear that they must have felt Cal was nothing more than a guy who showed up after last call. Cal sidestepped the most belligerent group in the back of the line as they stumbled towards the bus, and he headed for the back door of the club. Mia was there waiting for him. Mia held her pregnant belly with both hands, cradling her unborn child for whom she had forfeit her life as an individual. She was wearing a willowy blouse that hardly held her swollen breasts, but the sleeves were both elegant and wizardly, fluttering off of her wrists as her bony hands locked together below her navel. Her fingers were tangled, squeezing the circulation out of each other as they tried to hold their part of whatever tension Mia was feeling. Cal could just see the stretch marks climbing her midriff, and he quickly met her gaze as he realized his eyes' ill manners. She looked at Cal with a look that was maternal and filled with pity. The pity in her voice was no match for the pity in her eyes, and Cal could hear the infant in her belly chiming in unison. Hi, sugar. Cal had seen this look many times before from his own mother, and he cringed as he was reminded of all his failures as a son. Mia's tone was uncharacteristically somber, and Cal could see the weight of something on her mind. The indecisiveness of her brow, the scarring from biting her lower lip, the posture of a woman broken with responsibility, all signs with which Cal was all too familiar. He did his best to remain intact. Hi, Miss Mia, have I told you today that you are beautiful? What can I do for you this morning? Mia let out a long sigh and quickly sucked it back in, fighting tears just as his mother would. Cal, honey, I'm sorry, her face contorted towards the pavement as she birthed her monologue. The thing is, Cal, with this baby coming, I'm gonna need all the help I can get, and my baby daddy ain't got no job because he hurt his legs bad working construction on that damn Japanese toy building, and he's got doctor's bills, and I got doctor bills, and we need a new place to live and a car because I don't want my baby riding the bus, and between me losing the work because of my figure and him losing work because of his legs, we ain't gonna be able to take care of this baby even if I get to dancing again. So I had to do it, and I'm real sorry, Cal. I didn't know it would go like this, but I went and talked to Mr. Crouch, and he said he couldn't do nothing for me, and I begged for him to think of something. Then he said he would try if I did something for him, so I let him, and her whole body was quivering as she relived a moment that Cal couldn't bear to relive alongside her. Mia. Cal reached for her arm, but he was unable to find words through the flood of incomprehension. He closed his sad blue eyes. Cal felt his mother's tears as she wept empathetically over his own crumpled and violated body. The sheets, stained, saturated, and vibrant with blood, enveloped Cal in a womb of his own fluids as his mother mourned the loss of her child and the birth of nobody. Mia's sob shocked Cal back to the moment. His arm was still extended towards Mia, hovering a few inches to the left of her shoulder. Cal wasn't sure what he was feeling. In some ways, he saw Mia as his own mother in that moment, and in other ways, he imagined himself to be Mia's mother. both identities emerging from the same moment, somehow provided Cal with a glimpse of clarity. His arm retracted slowly and shakily, and finally he managed to choke out a response. Mia, I'm sorry, I had no idea. Look, I will take on double shifts and give you everything I earn in overtime, and I can cover your shifts anytime, and you can keep the money from those too. What happened to you, it's heinous, and it's not your fault, and I want you to know that, Cal, please. After Mr. Crouch had finished with me, he said he'd give my baby daddy a job washing dishes. Mia, that's great. Like I said, I'll help in any way I can, and I'll do my best to keep your boyfriend protected and up to speed. No, Cal, you're not getting it. Mr. Crouch has given away your job, and I'm so sorry, but my family needs this. Mia paused as the dust settled over what she had to say. Of course, Cal was not particularly attached to washing dishes at the nightclub, but it was easy, and he had a friend who cared enough to go out of her way to tell him the truth, something he so rarely heard. So, Cal's heart rate began to rise, and his open palm of support slowly began to clench. What you're saying is that Mr. Crouch forced himself on you only to say that your boyfriend could have my shitty job? Mia began to unfold from her crumpled state as Cal began to help her with the weight. It was then that Cal noticed the bruising on Mia's inner thighs and throat. Some of her hair was missing, and her body wanted to fold into itself like a dog whose tail is tucked up to his chest. The silence was only interrupted by the occasional sob of this woman in disbelief of her own experience.
So I know with creative thesis, most people do not read as much as we do. Like if you're doing an academic thesis, did you read any books that helped with the writing, like that weren't not fiction books that were
Like
influential?
craft how-to type books.
It was pretty much this, Kingdom Hearts, and then the crafting and the how-to and the editing was pretty much all with Christina.
And did you read any other books? Do you know of any other books like Where the Rainbow Grows?
Christina gave me some of, Troyer wrote them, right? The little morning pamphlets. Jason Troyer writes those pamphlets on how to mourn the loss of your pets. So that was the other literature that I looked at. But most of it, the majority of the work that was done, I would say is atypical in that it was more explorative of kind of how I felt about it and how it affected me, and less about what I was learning from other sources after it kind of got rolling.
And so usually with creative thesis, people make a start on their novel, but they almost never finish. How far in are you?
I'd say if it was compared to this, I think this is about 220 pages, and the dogs don't come into this book until about page 60. And so I'm right at the point where the dog comes into the book. So I'd say if at the most like a quarter of the way through.
About a quarter. And so even though you of course don't have to finish it for thesis, are you planning to go ahead and finish your book on your own?
That is a good question. I mean, I don't think it'll ever go away. I think it's a big part of who I am, especially with the way that it's kind of come to be. But right now, it'll probably get pushed to the back burner. But I'd like to. I definitely like to.
Do you all have any questions?
I have one more. So what would you say, Caleb, is it's fictional, it's probably not a children's book because your protagonist is 30 and the adult subject matter, so who would you say is your target audience? Adult fiction but modeled on When the River Grows?
Yeah, that's a good question. My original target audience when I first started kind of piecing together a project 2 years ago was for, I guess, people my age who had families who had maybe trauma or intense emotional connections with their family or mental illness or something. But I think my target audience would be anyone who feels like they need something good to come into their life. I mean, kind of like anyone with a dog is fair game, I'd say.
Do you know about the kind of new genre called new adult? You know, like we've had young adult fiction for quite a while, and there's a recent publishing where new adult, which is sort of a subcategory targeted for people in their early to mid to late 20s. Sounds like that might be exactly what you're writing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely for people who are past young adult. You know, they've gone through that first part of adulthood where they're kind of figuring things out, and they're kind of on that cusp where they're trying to understand who they've become. So I think that's a big part of it.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I would encourage you to complete this project. I mean, if you're only 60 pages in, you've already grabbed me, and I am 2 generations beyond your target audience. And for your own benefit, I think you started something very good. I think you would benefit tremendously if you see it through to the end. I want to read the end.
I had a few more pages I was going to read, but I know I went over the timer like 5 minutes ago. So.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it if we didn't have to go over a couple minutes. Yeah, but I totally agree. Definitely finish it, and then maybe you can share that version with us someday. Well, congratulations on finishing up the last part of comms. This brings you to the end of comprehensive exams. The oral part is done. Good luck with the rest of thesis.
When will I know how I scored?
You know, those grades are tallied up by different people in the department, and then Wendy, the administrative assistant, collates everything. So I believe she'll report it by email, won't she? I think that's how it happens.
I think she sends you an email that it's ready, and then you either find the letter in your box, or you have to go by her office and pick it up.
Yeah, but it definitely comes to Wendy's office.
But I would say that this, since you're the only one that did comps this semester, I would say that most of the rest of it's graded, and this will be one of the last sections.
Yeah, so I'd say he should definitely understand that early next week. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. All right. Well, I know you're super busy. Thanks for taking time to get this done.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thanks for opening it up and letting us come. And thank you for all the support to get,
Of course. He was easy to work with. He
Well,
didn't need to.
I know it was a much better process with
Yeah.
Advisor 2.0.
Some recognition.
And
Scott,
You
I don't know
thank them.
how our family could ever repay you for